Hi, I am Bethany, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a read aloud from the book Lulu and the Brontosaurus by Judith Viorst and illustrated by Lane Smith. Now this book would be read aloud. My goal would be early in the year, and then throughout the year I would be using it as a mentor text for Writer's Workshop. Now I believe this is a great book for Writer's Workshop, and especially focusing on how a writer is reflecting as they are writing. Today I'm really going to be focusing on conclusions and looking at the conclusion of the story. Our goal as we are working through this as a class and focusing on the conclusion portion is that we are learning how to conclude our story in a way that is consistent with the text, that we are providing that satisfying conclusion, wrapping up the ends of the story. We don't have to wrap everything up, but really focusing on that conclusion portion. So again, I would be using this in Writer's Workshop as a mentor text that we could have read through as a class earlier and bringing up again multiple times throughout the year. So, just a little background information on this book, Lulu and the Brontosaurus. It is about a young girl named Lulu who would like a Brontosaurus. As a short version. When she does not get her way, she throws tantrums, screeching, kicking, screaming, and all of that. Mom and Dad say no to her getting a Brontosaurus, so Lulu decides to go off by herself into the forest to find one. Along the way, she runs into different animals in the forest and does not treat them well. Comes across the Brontosaurus, but the surprise is that the Brontosaurus wants a Lulu for a pet. So there is all of that. Lulu, of course, does not want that, ends up running away from the Brontosaurus, ends up running back into the animals, and because of her interactions with the Brontosaurus, has started to change her manners somewhat. And that actually is where we are going to start. Now, I will be reading 3 chapters, but they are all conclusions, and the way the author has chosen is that she writes 3 different conclusions and allows the reader to choose. Now, for my students, I would say we would write one conclusion that we would put in our story, but conclusions go through that revision process. So the first one is not really as satisfying, doesn't seem to follow the story and how the story has been presented. The second one is adding more details, but it's just not that conclusion you're really looking for yet. Still, it's better than the first one. Anything's better than the first one. But the second one and the third one really seems to wrap it up in a way that is satisfying to all of the readers. So, without further ado, I'll be reading from Lulu and the Brontosaurus by Judith Viorst and illustrated by Lane Smith, starting at Chapter 13. Chapter 13. It wasn't too much later that Lulu could see that she was nearly out of the forest. She was happy that soon she would be with her mom and her dad, but along with feeling happy, she was also feeling sad when she thought of the Brontosaurus she'd left behind. As a matter of fact, she pictured the poor lonely dinosaur so clearly in her mind that it almost seemed he was standing there just outside of the forest waiting for her. And he was. This would be a part to point out to students, just to actually sit and be quiet and let them see what they can notice as the author is telling more of the story through the illustrations. Was Lulu shocked? You bet. What, she asked, are you doing here, Mr. B? I found a shortcut, the Brontosaurus replied. Lulu smiled a soft, sweet smile, then shook her head and sighed. And then she said, and even though I'm the person writing this story, I truly don't know why she's saying it in rhyme. Please try to understand, Mr. B, that I cannot be your pet, even though you're the nicest Brontosaurus I ever met. And if you take me away with you, I'll keep on running back home every chance that I get. Not a bad rhyme, though the last line's a little lumpy. I would point out to the students here that we're seeing that inner dialogue of the author. And the author is connecting with her own text. And sometimes stories take you in ways that you as the author didn't ever imagine. "I already figured that out while I was waiting for you," the Brontosaurus told Lulu. "I do understand that you can't be my pet, but please understand that I can't be your pet either." Well, Lulu understood, and the Brontosaurus understood. It seemed there was only one thing left to do. So they stood there quietly, looking at each other for a moment, and then they did it. The Brontosaurus bent his long neck till his face was close to Lulu's. He kissed her gently on the cheek and said, "Happy birthday, little pet, and goodbye." Lulu put her arms around the Brontosaurus's neck. She kissed him gently on his nose and said, "Don't be too lonely, Mr. B, and goodbye." Then she slowly walked down the road that would take her home. Then he slowly walked down the road that would take him home. And although Lulu and the Brontosaurus remembered each other forever, they never saw each other again. The maybe end. At this point as a class we would be discussing that ending. This would be a great time to do some partners or just short little formative assessments with thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle, and discussing the craft of the maybe end, that the author isn't done with telling her story, maybe or maybe not, so we'll see if there's more. Chapter 13, again. This is also a point you could point out parentheses, what they are, what they're doing, how they allow the reader to get more information, as opposed to what is just in the text. Wait! I'm really not all that sure about this ending. Maybe a little too mushy, a little too sad, but since I'm the person writing this story, I'm writing another ending and you can decide which one you'd rather have. Again, good reflection from the point of the author to show the students. Well, Lulu understood, and the Brontosaurus understood, that neither of them could be the other's pet. But why should that mean they had to say goodbye? "Come with me, and I'll give you a piece of my birthday cake," said Lulu. "I'd like that," the dinosaur said. "May I give you a ride?" And Lulu arrived at her house, riding happily on the back of the Brontosaurus. When her mom and her dad heard the noise of a dinosaur clomping into their yard, they remembered Lulu and they remembered her birthday. Lucky for all, her cake had already been made. "Don't worry, he isn't my pet," said Lulu. "He's only going to stay here for a piece of cake and a glass of lemonade. But he's kind of a lonely guy, and I would like to invite him back for Thanksgiving dinner." From that time on, the Brontosaurus came to Lulu's house for her birthday, Thanksgiving, and the 4th of July. And sometimes she visited his house, though since she didn't like eating leaves, she always brought a suitcase of pickle sandwiches. On one very special birthday, she not only invited her friend the Brontosaurus, but also the snake and the tiger and the bear. And the Brontosaurus noticed that whenever Lulu asked anyone for anything, she always said please. The end. Maybe? So now as readers and listeners, we have two choices for an ending. This would lead into a partner discussion time where they can discuss the different endings, what they like, what they didn't like, what they felt, how they would rate it. Maybe they wanted more details, or it's not enough, or it's too many details. Deciding what they're thinking as that listener, as that reader who's reading this. But then as the author, what else would they want to discuss? Again, we have the maybe ending, so let's see if there's anything else. Chapter 13. Yet again. Still not totally satisfied. I'm going to try once more because I think I need to answer certain questions like, were Lulu's mom and her dad worried sick when she didn't come home that night? Had they bought her a present for her birthday? Did she completely stop being a pain and turn into polite? And how did all that stuff fit into her suitcase? I'm going to answer these questions, and when I'm done, you will have your choice of 3 different endings. We could also discuss the way the author is talking to us as the readers, is having that dialogue, and it's another way to choose to write. Well, Lulu understood, and the Brontosaurus understood, that though they couldn't be pets, they could be friends. So, Lulu invited the Brontosaurus back to her house for some birthday cake and introduced him to her mom and her dad. They hadn't been waiting and worrying and wondering where she was because they had fallen asleep sipping their tea. And they didn't open their eyes till the Brontosaurus, with Lulu riding on his back, came clomp, clomp, clomping into their front yard. They gave her a silver necklace for her birthday, and she sang them a whole new birthday song, whole new Brontosaurus song. I didn't get a Brontosaurus for a pet. I didn't get a Brontosaurus for a pet. It sure looks like you brought one home, Lulu's mom said to Lulu. And we still say no, you can't have one, said her dad. And both of them waited for Lulu to screech and throw herself down on the floor and kick her heels and wave her arms in the air. Except she didn't. What happened to the screeching? Asked her quite astonished mom. And her dad asked, what about throwing yourself on the floor? Lulu replied, very dignified, I'm 1 year older today, and I'm not doing that kid stuff anymore. And she says a very nice please, said the Brontosaurus. After the cake and the lemonade, the dinosaur said goodbye, but he would return for many holiday visits. Sometimes the snake and tiger and bear came too. Although she kept getting older, Lulu never turned into perfect. She still, though less and less often, sometimes screeched and forgot about please, though she never again in her life said boo on you. But she mainly wasn't a pain, and the Brontosaurus was mainly not lonely anymore. As for how all that stuff fit into Lulu's suitcase, I'm sorry to say that I don't have a clue. I am, after all, just the person who's writing this story. The end. And it is truly the end. We had to check the pages. So after reading all 3 endings, we would compare and contrast, really focusing on the analyzing. What makes that 3rd ending more satisfying of a conclusion than the 1st ending and the 2nd ending? And then carrying that over into our own revisions of our conclusions. So this has been Bethany reading parts of Lulu and the Brontosaurus by Judith Viorst, illustrated by Lane Smith, to have that opportunity to compare and contrast different endings and really work on the conclusions in a writer's workshop. Thanks for listening.